welcome into a live edition of the Broncos Breakdown. We've got a lot to break down on today's show. Denver signed cornerback Fabian Moreau, so we're going to get to know the newest member of this team. Plus, we're going to talk about training camp, what we have learned with about a week of camp in the books. And unfortunately, I don't want this to become a yearly tradition, but it's 2 years in a row, unfortunately. Tim Patrick replacements. We do have to acknowledge that Denver has lost a starting wide receiver, and last year their replacement plan, I don't know if it was a bad one, but it definitely didn't bring anything to the table. So maybe they go about it a bit differently this year because they've got a year of experience when it comes to replacing Tim Patrick. It sucks having to do this, but it's the nature of the beast. It's football, and all we can do right now is just, send our best wishes to Tim Patrick, and hopefully we will see him play in the NFL again. But I'd be lying to you guys if I said coming back from an ACL and an Achilles injury was not a very light thing to undertake. But shout out your city. Before we get into all of that, I do want to know where everyone is watching from today. So let me know in the comment section right now where you are watching. I'm going to be giving shout outs to everyone in our live show who is active in the chat function. So I've got Los Angeles coming in from John. We have Amarillo, Texas in the house. Hawaii, what's going on, Keanu? We've got California from Mr. Garcia. Pueblo, Colorado, love to see it. We've got San Antonio from Angel. Jacob is in Chicago. What's up, 847? Sandra is in ATL. Shout out to Taco Mac. Jordy's watching from Albuquerque. More Colorado, of course. South Central, Kansas, Amarillo, Texas 2, Syracuse, New York, North Carolina, California, Louisville, Kentucky. I feel like I'm on a presidential tour right now. But keep letting me know where you are watching from in the comments section. And while you guys are typing your cities down below, I do want to get the pulse of everyone watching right now. What's your panic level on losing Tim Patrick? If you had to scale it 1 to 10, where are you at right now? Because for me, I'm at a solid, like if 10 is season's over and 1 is this doesn't mean anything for the season, I'm at a 6.2. I'm at a 6.2. This offense last year sucked. I don't think it would have been dramatically different with Tim Patrick. Let's be real. Russell Wilson was off his game. Horrible play calling. Bad coaching. Don't tell Hackett that. But it sucks because I think Sean Payton had a big role for Tim Patrick this season where he viewed him as his like Michael Thomas light / Kirkland / Walmart version in Denver, right? Not quite the same as the guy who set the NFL record for receptions in the season, but I think he viewed Tim Patrick as a go-to guy over the middle of the field to keep the chains moving and to be that safety blanket, if you will, for Russell Wilson, which he needed last year, and that's gone now. Because Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, they've got a lot of great strength, but they're not the best at, playing like down in the post basketball, if you will, over the middle of the field against some DBs and linebackers. That's what Tim Patrick was extraordinary at, and they're going to miss that. So I'm at a 6.2. I'm seeing Eric say he's at a 3. Austin is at a 3. Ben's at a 7. Sean is at a 4. We've got a 3. Is that 3 right there? That's a 5 from Mr. Silverback. Vincent Vinny is actually at an 8. He's going to be sorely missed. I'll tell you that much. It is not going to be an easy replacement. I think Tim Patrick is, every single team has that one player where no one else in the rest of the league really knows how valuable he is to that team except for that fan base. There's always that one guy that no other fan base knows or is on that on their radar except when you go play that team and you're like, holy shit, number 17 is making some plays today. Like, that's Tim Patrick for Denver, where when other teams come play the Broncos, they're like, oh, Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton. No. Don't forget about 81. He is the glue guy, as I like to call him. When you're running low on beer at the party, he's making a run. That's Tim Patrick, and it's going to suck without having him this year. All right, with that being said, though, who do you want the Broncos to sign? I saw the first commenter in today's show say they want Denver to go out and get Kenny Golladay. Let me know who you'd like to see the Broncos sign, whether that's Kenny Golladay, whether that's Julio Jones, Jarvis Landry, N'Keal Harry, Sammy Watkins. There's a lot of notable names still on the market. T.Y. Hilton. Let me know who you would like the Broncos to sign to try and fill the void of Tim Patrick. If they decide to go that route, they're first going to look inwards, right? What do they have in their own backyard? Who's on their roster? Whether that is Marvin, Mims, Marquez, Callaway. But if ultimately they decide we need to go out and sign another wide receiver, who would you like that to be? I'll share my answer later on in the video because we have a whole segment dedicated to that. But I do want to hear from everyone watching right now who you'd like to see the Broncos sign. I've got Richie Baez saying 7 in terms of missing Tim Patrick. Vincent says Jarvis Landry. C. Chang says sign whoever. I'm fine. Craig Robinson from Iowa put Patrick Lawson at 7.5. Craig knows ball. It is going to be a very tough player to replace. Quinn Miller says Julio Jones. Julio Jones, does he have anything left in the tank? If the answer is yes, then it's a good signing. But if you don't think the answer is yes, then what are we doing here? Because the Bucs wasted their time last year with Julio Jones for like one good game. Wasn't it week 1 against the Cowboys? Julio had a good game, and after that, hardly saw him again. So it's not worth it if you think Julio's done. But if you think he's healthy and he tells you he's healthy, signing Julio Jones in August and getting just 75% of the skill set he had back in his total domination decade, that would be a pretty good late season addition in my eyes. T.Y. Hilton's coming in here. Sammy Watkins, solid number 2. Okay. Julio would be a good mentor. Interesting. We got Michael Montoya saying Jarvis Landry. All right. Now, before we get on into the meat and potatoes of today's show, get your questions answered for our mailbag by typing hashtag Broncos in the chat while asking your question. Or if you want to guarantee a spot on screen, you can super chat. If you enjoy the content we're doing here and you want to throw something our way, by no means, no pressure or anything like that, but it is greatly appreciated. So if you want to guarantee your spot on screen, you can super chat. If you want to hop in line with everyone else, get in the chat section right now and type in hashtag Broncos, and producer Matthew McCullough will pick his favorite question. So you're at the big mercy of big techs. But I see a question coming in from our friend over in Hawaii. Put hashtag Broncos in your question. Otherwise, we can't put it on screen. So coming up on today's show, the latest news and rumors, including a signing and some training camp conversations, plus Tim Patrick replacements. Sucks, but we got to do it. We got to do it. We got to talk about who Denver could go get or promote to replace number 81, and then that live Q&A that we just talked about. So hashtag Broncos or Super Chat to be a part of it. Okay, Mr. McCullough, almost ready? All right. I'll give some shout-outs until we are ready to roll. Angel says losing $9 million in the salary cap doesn't seem worth it. You're not adding anyone for $9 million at this point. I'll help you out right there. Like, if you signed, say, Jarvis Landry, it would be like a 1-year, $4 million contract. Just to give you guys a bit of a rough idea as to what a contract would look like. I don't see anyone being signed for over $5 million, for example. Maybe some incentives, but the vet minimum would probably be in play, and a lot of these guys have played a lot of seasons, so their vet minimum is going to be a little bit higher up than just $1.5 million, but you're not spending $9 to $10 million on any receiver at this point in the game. Okay, we got the green light. Mr. McCullough, let's jump into the latest Broncos news and rumors on a live Broncos Breakdown. We've got some news to discuss right off the top of today's show. As Mike Garafolo tweeted out, the Broncos are signing veteran cornerback Fabian Moreau to a 1-year deal, source says. Moreau, who worked out for the Dolphins the other day, lands in Denver after appearing in 14 games with 11 starts for the Giants last year. So some background information on Fabian Moreau. Last year he was with the New York Giants. Filled in, had some starts, like Garafolo said. No interceptions, but 10 pass breakups, so a big double-digit number right there. Before that, he was in Atlanta, still no picks, 11 pass breakups in 2021. Also spent some time on the Texans practice squad back then. But the former third-round pick out of UCLA started his career off in Washington, and he did collect some interceptions right there. You can see he tallied 5 total from 2019 to 2020. But Moreau joins this cornerback room, and I don't think he's pushing to start over Damari Mathis. I think the jobs are pretty well fitted at this point. Pat Surtain, no doubt, CB1. I think Damari Mathis is opposite of him. K'Wan Williams controls the slot. And then you got the rookie Riley Moss, kind of the first guy off the bench with Fabian Moreau. Moreau is definitely going to push for playing time. This was not a, hey, let's add some depth to our 90-man roster. This was a, you know what, we see a potential 53-man roster spot right there. And if we know one thing about George Payton, he loves DBs. Remember early on in his tenure, not too long ago in Denver, what does he do? He drafts Pat Surtain, right? And then he goes out in free agency or beforehand, and he adds Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby. Like, he has made a big investment in the cornerback position so far as Denver's general manager. He moves up in the draft to get Riley Moss, gave up a future third-round pick to Seattle because he liked him so much. He has always had a bit of an affinity towards cornerbacks because if you are going to win in the National Football League, you need a good quarterback. And in order to take down good quarterbacks, you need good edge rushers, which Denver doesn't really have consistent edge rushers, let's be honest, but they have a very good secondary. In fact, the secondary has pretty much dominated so far training camp. Fabian Moreau comes over. He's a depth piece, but he's not a camp body, right? There's a difference right there. He's not some guy that's competing for a practice squad spot. I think he makes this 53-man roster, and I think Denver's just looking at their cornerback room going, we play some really tough quarterbacks in the NFL, especially in the AFC West. We don't want our season to go down the shitter because one of our starting corners got hurt, and we didn't have a good next man up. So let's make our next man up an NFL vet who, if he needs to fill in for a couple of starts, we don't have to panic too much because Faion Hicks, the seventh rounder from Wisconsin last year, all of a sudden is getting some meaningful snaps, and he looks like a fish out of water. Now, with that being said, let's get into what we were going to talk about today right before the Fabian Moreau news broke, and that is some Broncos news and camp observation. So speaking of signings, they did not only add Moreau today, the Broncos also brought back a local wide receiver, as Mike Kliss tweeted out here, Nick Williams. So Nick Williams, I feel for the guy. From the area, went to CSU Pueblo, then transferred to UNLV, and he has been in and out of the Broncos locker room. Signed, released, signed, released, signed, released. It's like Michael Scott. Snip, snap, snip, snap, snip, snap. So make up your mind. But ultimately, he does come back. They re-signed the local wide receiver. I know this comes right after the Tim Patrick news, and I feel like last year when Tim Patrick went down, and I hate that I'm even remembering this, they added some random, no-name-ish, sorry, Nick, wide receiver, and that's not a replacement. Look at Denver's wide receiver room. Without Tim Patrick, you have Marvin Mims, who's probably going to step into a larger role. But now Montrell Washington, Marquez Callaway, Kendall Hinton, Jalen Virgil, all those guys are going to be called on more to try and fill the void and pick up the slack from Tim Patrick's absence. This is not a replacement for Patrick. This is simply a camp body. Honestly, they might have made this move even before Tim Patrick got hurt. Ultimately, we know the NFL is a tough thing to predict, and when you have 90 guys on the roster, if one guy is looking like he's a bit out of shape and a bit slow in the drills, you cut him and you call the next guy on your whiteboard, pretty much regardless as to what position it is, because you're just looking for talent at this point. And if one of these guys who are the 90th man on the roster end up making your practice squad and improve the team throughout the season, awesome. If not, no harm, no foul, no sweat. But this is not a replacement for Tim Patrick. This is a camp body in my eyes. Now, never miss a roster move when you are subscribed, whether it's Denver signing Fabian Moreau, whether it's Nick Williams. We cover all moves, big or small. We don't body shame here. So make sure to subscribe. We're trying to reach 15,000 subs. We're at 14,359. If If you have not subscribed, consider going ahead and doing so and helping us grow our channel. Other stuff from training camp I want to share with all of our viewers. Team reporter Eric Delilah tweeted out, outside linebacker Frank Clark is back out here at Broncos practice, but he doesn't appear to be in pads. Head coach Sean Payton said yesterday that it was a club decision that Frank Clark didn't practice on Monday. Now, from what I've heard, boots on the ground, is that Frank Clark is dealing with something. I'm not quite sure what the extent of that something is, whether that's just a bit of an illness or whether he's a bit sore or something's, a little bit not right. I don't quite know. Hopefully it gets resolved because this is not a light training camp. Like, this is a 1980s NFL training camp. Sean Payton is dialing the clock back. And if you're not available, well, you're not on the field. Like, they are not going to just hold people's hands and go, don't worry, we just need you guys in September. No. Sean Payton knows he has a big body of work, and it's going to start now in training camp. And he needs guys who are available, guys who are going to put their blood, sweat, and tears into this team, and not players who are just going to stand on the sidelines because they've got a bad toe. Like, not saying that's what's going on here with Frank Clark, but this is not a team like the Chiefs or the Bills or the Bengals that can just let star players rest for no reason other than, well, we know what we are. We are a winning machine. We don't need these guys in August. Denver does. Denver is not a winning machine right now. They need players to play in training camp and preseason. We saw last year how it went when you let your star players sit out and act like it's a JV game. No, you ended up looking like the JV team in the regular season. Also on the sideline today, while we film this on Tuesday, Randy Gregory. Hopefully he is okay. I have been pretty pessimistic about Randy Gregory so far in Denver. I was upbeat about the signing at the time, but after the first year, just did not go well. So hopefully we get him back on the field along with Frank Clark because this pass rush needs it. Another player not practicing. These are the only guys, so don't be too alarmed. Riley Moss, the rookie out of Iowa, he has been out for the past couple of days with an illness. So I don't think there's anything too nervous here or too, too big deal. I'm kind of drawing a blank, but just nothing to panic over. That's what I'm trying to spit out. The signing of Fabian Moreau is not a sign of Riley Moss is going to miss a lot of time. I think it's more of a sign of we like corners. There's a good corner still on the market. Why don't we make our team better by adding Moreau? But speaking of Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, to kind of put a bow on this segment, who do you think has more sacks in 2023? If you want to go with Frank Clark, you type 55 for his jersey number. If you want to go with Randy Gregory, type 5 down in the comment section. Let me know who you think has more sacks this upcoming season for the Broncos. To wrap up today's show, I want to go over a bit of a dark horse for a sack leader and kind of just dive into number 99, the new guy on the team, Zach Allen. So Eric Delilah also tweeted out this. Zach Allen has been a problem out here. Had a batted pass and then would have just had a sack, has blown through the line of scrimmage a couple of times. Zach Allen was a signing that I had mixed feelings on, and we'll kind of unpack that throughout the second or last part of today's show. But I do want to share with you guys Zach Allen's stats through his 4 seasons so far in the NFL, all with the Arizona Cardinals. Last year, 5.5 sacks, a career high for him in a single season, 10 tackles for loss. He was signed to replace Draymond Jones, right? Denver ultimately had to make a decision. They had somewhere between $40 to $50 million to spend on a new defensive end, and they decided to go with Zach Allen, Vance Joseph's guy down in the desert, and let Draymond Jones walk to Seattle. Now, when you compare Zach Allen and Draymond Jones, because this is the comparison to be had here. Denver had a choice. They decided to go with Zach Allen. And when you look at their career stats, you might think Draymond Jones is the better player, at least statistically, and he's got more sacks for sure. But quietly, Zach Allen last year, I mean, we're going to look at some numbers later on. He had a lot of pressures, whereas Draymond Jones has played in a lot more games than Zach Allen and only has 6 more pressures to show for. Before we get to that portion of this segment, The new Broncos sideline hats are available, and you're a big fan of these hats. I like some of them. You can get your very own right now by going to chatsports.com/Broncos hat. That link is in the comments and the description of today's video. So make sure you get your very own 2023 Denver Broncos official sideline hat. $45.7 million for a guy like Zach Allen, who has never had more than 5.5 sacks in a season and a career 11.5 through 4 seasons, felt a bit high. Not going to lie. That's why when the signing was made, I was a little, was this a massive overpay? And that's kind of the nature of free agency. You have to overpay. That's why players always get cut before their contract is up, because you have to overpay in free agency. But once that guaranteed money is pretty much used, then you move on from the guy and you save some dead money. But Zach Allen last year had a very dominant stretch. Before he had a season-ending hand injury, from weeks 4 through 13, 19 pressures and 5.5 sacks. Keep in mind, last year, Draymond Jones had 16 pressures total the entire season. And Zach Allen had 19 pressures just in that little span of weeks 4 through 13. So Denver is betting on getting 17 weeks of that Zach Allen, right? The guy we just looked at who had all those sacks in just a 10-week span, right? If they can get that guy for a full season, well, $43, $44, $45 million is going to look like a bit of a steal if they're getting 10-plus sacks, 10 to 12 sacks from a player that's getting paid, what's the math, like $13 million-ish a season, 15 million, something like that. But regardless, that is the player that Denver is hoping they are finding. Not the guy who was largely unavailable for chunks of his first few years in the NFL. They're hoping and betting on a healthy Zach Allen. And if they get a healthy Zach Allen, who's getting better and better as his years go on in the NFL, they're going to be very happy with what they paid versus what Seattle paid for Draymond Jones, who I was never all that crazy about. But who do you think will end up leading the Broncos in sacks? Will it be Zach Allen? Will it be Frank Clark, Randy Gregory? Probably not going to be Baron Browning anymore just because he's going to miss the start of the season. But let me know down in the comment section below who you think leads this team in sacks. To wrap up the show, I've got some summer hot takes I want to share with you guys because today's high in Denver is 86 degrees. So that gets us a very nice hot sand take. And our hot sand take today is this. The Broncos' first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft is an edge rusher. I'm saying that right now, which I know might not feel like a scalding hot take, but to shoot your shot in August for next April before any regular season games are played is not easy. But going into next year's draft, just looking at their edge rusher room, Frank Clark, 1-year contract. Randy Gregory could be cut after this season if he does not live up to the payday. Baron Browning, I don't know what to make of him just yet exactly. There's no clear Zach Allen. We got to wait and see if he really lives up to the contract. There's no real proven edge rusher in this room right now, so I think they make that a priority in next year's draft. Who do you guys think leads the team in sacks this season? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'm seeing Frank Clark. I think Frank Clark will probably lead the team in sacks as well because I think he's going to play the most amount of games. And that's what I'm looking for. If you want to lead the team in sacks, if you want to lead your team in really any category, a lot of it comes down to who gets the opportunities, who gets the snaps, who has the most games played. And if Randy Gregory continues his NFL career of missing games, I don't see a way he leads this team in sacks. And Baron Brown is going to miss some time. So that kind of comes down to Frank Allen and Zach Allen, or Frank Clark and Zach Allen. So I'll roll with Frank Clark. He's just more of a proven pass rusher in my eyes. We had a super chat come through. We'll throw that on screen. We're having just a little bit of technical difficulties, it looks like. Is that true, McCullough? Okay, we'll get it on screen for you in just a moment, Mr. Maximus. There it is. How about that? Broncos fans have PTSD at this point. This is true. This is true. I mean, if it was not for the Chargers, there would be a no-doubter about Denver being the most injury-plagued team for a long time. Like, it's not new, right? Even Peyton Manning dealt with an injury while he was in Denver, right? There have been a lot of key players for the Broncos who have gone down with injuries, which happens to every team. But at the same time, you can look and see how many players end up on IR for each team. Some teams have 20 players on injured reserve. Some teams have 3 to 5. Like, there's a huge difference between first and last, right? We're not talking about last place team having 15 guys on IR and first place having 12. Like, it's not that small of a gap. And so, unfortunately, every team has to overcome injuries, but not every team has to overcome 5, 6, 7 starters going down. Like, that is a tough thing to swallow. And so for Denver, I can see Broncos country having PTSD of, oh shit, here we go again. I feel you, man. I feel you, no doubt about it. Now, we have some Tim Patrick replacements to get to here next up on the show. It's not a favorite segment of mine, but unfortunately, it is now becoming an annual segment of ours where we have to replace star players and key starters, if you will, who have gone down with an injury early in the season, or in this case, before the season even starts. So we've got that on tap for you guys. And then we have a mailbag. So if you want to start getting those questions in right now, hashtag Broncos in the live chat, or you can super chat like our friend Maximus just did, and we'll throw your super chat on screen. So we've got that next up on the show. Mr. McCullough, we ready to roll? Just a minute? Okay, I'll give some shout-outs in the meantime. Sandra thinks Nick Bonito. Well, it's Sandra Penn Bonito. Do we have Nick Bonito's mom or aunt here? Potentially. I'm not quite sure. Let me know. I don't know if Nick Bonito is going to get to the point of leading this team in sacks in his second season. He would need to have a big leap after last year. But if Nick Bonito leads this team in sacks, Denver's got a great future at edge rusher if their second-round pick out of Oklahoma last year really bursts out and emerges on the scene and takes over that room and has a clear alpha at the edge rusher spot. So I'd love to see that happen, but not as optimistic as you are, Sandra. I think it's going to be Frank Clark. Now, with that being said, we got the thumbs up. Okay, let's talk about some Tim Patrick replacements. We're going to run through all the options the Broncos have at their disposal for trying to replace Tim Patrick. But if he comes across this video, which I'm sure he's going to be looking to see what people are saying about him, let's let him know that Broncos country doesn't just have his back, but we are 100% behind him and rallying around him and encouraging his recovery. And I want to break the channel record. 810 likes on a video for 81 for Tim Patrick. So let's get 810 likes for number 81. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown and what is unfortunately becoming an annual tradition. Tim Patrick replacements. Sucks dick. No other way around it. It blows. But it is the nature of the beast. It is the NFL. Players get hurt. The league does not stop. It is next man up. And so we are going to run through some options Denver, George, and Sean Payton have to try and replace their number, 1, 2, or 3 wide receiver, depending on who you ask. Let's be honest. But the first option for replacing Tim Patrick is, before we even look outwards, before we even look at free agency or anything like that, what about in-house, right? What do you have in your own backyard right now? When we look at Denver's wide receiver room, they have a pretty deep wide receiver class. Kendall Hinton, Marquez Callaway, Montrell Washington, Michael Bandy, Lil Jordan Humphrey. I mean, all of those players on screen, except for Nick Williams, have NFL regular season experience. That's not true for a lot of wide receiver rooms. There are a lot of wide receiver rooms that at the bottom, it's a bunch of UDFAs that have never even made a practice squad. That is not the case for Denver. They have a very deep wide receiver room. When I think about the first options to replace Tim Patrick in-house, Marvin Mims definitely comes to mind because he was their top draft pick. They moved up into round 2 to get the Oklahoma Sooner, who can stretch the field. Marquez Callaway, Kendall Hinton, Jalen Virgil, and Brandon Johnson, those last 3 guys, all flirted with the practice squad and the active 53-man roster a season ago. Marquez Callaway came over in free agency with Sean Payton. He had some good time in New Orleans, so he could be in for a bigger workload this upcoming season as he moves up the depth chart. But the obvious name is Marvin Mims, right? Because last year with Oklahoma, over 1,000 yards. He led the FBS in receiving average for qualifying players at 20.1 yards per reception, which is just wild to actually sit down and think about. 6 touchdowns. So Marvin Mims would be the clear and obvious in-house candidate to replace Tim Patrick. If you want to go to one of those other guys we just looked at, Marquez Callaway has the most experience of the bunch, over 1,000 career yards, 7 touchdowns. But Kendall Hinton, an all-time Broncos quarterback legend. Jalen Virgil and Brandon Johnson also had some really good moments last year. Both guys had touchdowns in the regular season after being promoted from the practice squad. But I know everyone is going to be quick to go to 83 to replace 81, and I think that's going to happen. But I do want to remind you that Marvin Mims and Tim Patrick are very different types of wide receivers, right? Marvin Mims averaged 20.1 yards per reception at Oklahoma his last year. Tim Patrick is not a player that when he steps on the field, the safeties take a step back because he's got that deep threat burning ability. They are very different types of receivers. They have very different skill sets. And Tim Patrick's got that big-bodied frame that makes it a nightmare in the red zone trying to box out against like he's down in the low post. Marvin Mims, he ain't boxing out anyone in the red zone. But I think Marvin Mims would be the first guy to see an increased workload in snaps, get on the field more, get more targets and all that, now that Tim Patrick, unfortunately, has been lost for the season. Now, let's say Denver wants to go external, right? After a couple of weeks in training camp and preseason, they're like, hey, we saw last year how it went in this offense without Tim Patrick and not really going external to replace him. And for whatever reason, they decide we don't want to go down that path again. There are some very notable free agent wide receivers starting things off with Mr. Julio Jones, a future NFL Hall of Famer that we all know has not been that prime Julio from Atlanta for the last few seasons. In fact, he has not played a full season since 2018. He's been limited to 58% of games in the past 3 seasons. His last year in Atlanta, his only year in Tennessee, and last year in Tampa Bay. In fact, last year with the Bucs, it was a career low in receiving yards and receptions. But Julio Jones is Julio Jones. I don't have to sell you on Julio Jones. What I have to sell you on, and I'm not really even trying to sell you on, is if you look at his stats over the last 4 years, if there is even just a drop of belief in the Payton brass, that 2019 Julio Jones is somehow still inside that version of the 2022 guy, they'll go out and get Julio Jones. But if they believe that he is what he has looked like over the last 3 years, and that 2019 guy is long gone at this point, then they're not going to give it a second thought. Ultimately, you really want to replace an injured Tim Patrick with a frequently injured player in Julio Jones. I think you're just signing yourself up for a headache and a lot of Advil being taken if you sign a player who then immediately gets injured and misses some time, because that's what he's done over the last 3 seasons. I'm not banking on that 2019 Julio Jones walking through the door and saving this team's season. Those days are over. Next guy we're going to look at is Jarvis Landry. Now, he's not quite as old as Julio Jones. 30 years old, last year with the New Orleans Saints after a long time in Cleveland, Ohio. And you can see in 2022, he was limited to just 9 games, 272 yards, 1 touchdown. Before that in Cleveland, you can see the unfortunate downfall for Jarvis or Juice. 1,100 yards, 800 yards, and then 500 yards, and now 272 yards. So if you want to add Jarvis Landry to add some leadership to this locker room, sure, I can get behind that. But does this team need a leader wide receiver? No, they've got plenty of veteran players in Courtland Sutton and Russell Wilson, right? This is not a young quarterback who needs a veteran receiver to help him along. So I would pass on Jarvis Landry. If you had to pick a wide receiver, who would you pick? Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry? Type their most notable number down in the comments section below. For me, between these two guys, I'd probably go with Julio because his ceiling's higher. And if you are able to capture that 2019 version, that's better than any version Jarvis Landry has ever been. But Landry is at least probably a little bit more healthy and younger and maybe has some more juice left in the tank. So you can make good arguments for both players. Third guy we're going to look at is Kenny Golladay, Northern Illinois legend. 29, so the youngest of the three we have looked at so far. And Kenny Golladay is an interesting nut to crack because he was at one point the fall of free agency, signed a 4-year, $72 million contract with the New York Giants. New York ultimately released him after 2 years of that 4-year contract. But it's not too long ago, he led the NFL in receiving touchdowns, which at this point might just be a random trivia fact in 10 years, when he had 11 back in 2019. Now, reportedly, he had some attitude issues in New York. I can't say for certainty because I was not in New York, but the buzz coming out of the Meadowlands was that he wasn't very happy with the targets he was getting, and instead of having a lunch pail work attitude or ethic to it and coming in and putting in the extra man hours to prove everyone he deserves more playing time, he decided to go the other way, which is pout on the sidelines and not run very hard and get hurt sort of and just want to sit out and take his $40 million guaranteed. When you look at Kenny Galladay's numbers, once again, we find ourselves in a very similar spot where we go, if you can find that 2019 version, sure, that's a great player to go out and sign. I don't think that 2019 version is walking through the door anytime soon. But if they believe that they can fix his attitude issues and that he's not bad anymore, but it's just it didn't work out in New York and the coaching staff wasn't great. I mean, they did fire Joe Judge, so he might have something to say about it not being 100% just his fault. Maybe Denver does take a flyer on Kenny Golladay and goes, hey, we're finding the NFL touchdown receiving leader from a few seasons ago who, didn't work out in New York, and he's partially to blame for it, but he was also in a horrible situation with, in my opinion, a bad quarterback in Daniel Jones and a bad coaching staff in those first few seasons with Joe Judge. So that's one name to keep an eye on for sure. The last two guys, former first-round pick N'Keal Harry and then Rashard Higgins as well, a notable name for some of you back at home. Two guys that definitely could be on the move in the next couple of weeks as teams definitely look to fill out their rosters. We'll throw on their career stats for you guys to see. N'Keal Harry, a first-round pick out of Arizona State for the New England Patriots, did not work out there, traded to Chicago, only with the Bears for one season. Whereas Rashard Higgins, kind of a long-time Cleveland Brown, was with the Panthers last I saw, but really didn't play any football in Carolina. Higgins has more experience, so if Denver doesn't want to go the big savvy name free agency route, but more of a lower-level name who's got, a little bit more of a pep in his step and ready to come in and try and prove he still has a spot in the NFL, these could be two guys to keep an eye on. But sound off for me down in the comment section below. Who do you want the Broncos to sign? Of those 5 players, if you had to pick one, who would it be? I'm probably in between Kenny Golladay and Rashard Higgins. I don't know what Higgins has left in the tank, but he had some good years for the Browns. And again, you're not finding a guy at this point who's going to walk through and save the season. But Kenny Golladay, if he can get his attitude checked, I just loved him so much in Detroit. I thought he was such a good player. I always wanted it to work out for him in New York. But maybe with an actual coach like Sean Payton, he can kind of get his head on straight and he can be a productive player for Denver and also be the type of receiver that Tim Patrick is, which is a big-bodied red zone target. Before we get on to option number 3 to replace Tim Patrick, make sure you check out the 2023 Broncos sideline hats. They are on sale right now, chatsports.com/Broncos hat. That link is in the comments and the description of today's video, too. If you're a fan of this year's sideline hats and merchandise and whatnot, apparel, make sure you check out our link and then pick up your very own Broncos hat. Third option for replacing Tim Patrick is via trade. Now, this one would be the most desperate of the 3, if you will, because it requires some assets going out the door as opposed to just promoting from within or signing someone to free agency. This would require some picks or some players going the other way to get someone. Now, who could they trade for? There are some receivers that I think could be on the move sometime between now and training camp ending or preseason ending and week 1 kicking off. Cedric Wilson is kind of getting boxed out in Miami. They've got Tyreek Hill. They have Jalen Waddle. There's not really a home for Cedric Wilson all of a sudden. Traquan Smith we'll look at in a moment. He's an interesting name for sure. Quez Watkins in the Eagles organization has kind of fallen down the depth chart a little bit. Corey Davis with the Jets has definitely fallen down the depth chart. I don't see how he's on New York's roster week 1 when they've got Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Garrett Wilson. They've got a lot of guys there in New York. And then I tossed on Hunter Renfrow for shits and giggles, more just to make Raiders fans upset that they're going to trade away one of their few good players. But Tre'Quan Smith is an interesting name because he does have some overlap with Sean Payton. In fact, when he played with Sean Payton in New Orleans, 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns in 15 games. Those aren't maybe eye-popping numbers. The 17 touchdowns is definitely not small, but you're not finding a wide receiver 1 or 2. You're looking for a wide receiver 3. And that could be Tre'Quan Smith. And if we have learned one thing, everyone, this offseason, what is it? Bueller. Sean Payton loves reunions. Sean Payton just wants to bring the whole band up to Denver. So would not be blown away if he makes a second trade, by the way, with his former team after bringing over tight end Adam Trautman during the draft. At the end of the day, do not expect a notable name to be traded to Denver. I just don't think they're going to have that big of an urgency to replace Tim Patrick with a high-caliber name that requires some premium assets going the other way. You might see them trade for someone towards roster cutdown day if George Payton's talking to another GM and he's saying, I'm going to cut this guy. And he goes, well, I don't want to risk not getting him on the waiver wire. Let me trade you a future 7th-round pick. That could be something that happens ultimately. To wrap up the show, today's high in Denver as we film this on Tuesday during our live show is 84 degrees, and that gets us a nice warm plate take. Our warm plate take today is this is the last season that Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and Tim Patrick are all on the Denver Broncos roster. I'm sorry, sucks to say out loud, but that's just the reality of what is likely going to happen here, which is Courtland Sutton is playing for his future in Denver this season. Jerry Jeudy's got this year and next year under contract, but I don't know what to make of Tim Patrick and his future just in football, period. And if he is able to come back and play, I'm not quite sure they'll be able to pay Sutton, Jeudy, and Patrick for another season. So ultimately, I think we're only going to see 11 total games where these three guys were all on the field at the same time. Who do you want the Broncos to sign? Let me know. I'm seeing Hunter Renfrow sounds interesting. It's tough to pull off inter-division trades. We talked about this with Josh Jacobs, if you guys remember. TJ Hawkinson did get traded from the Lions to the Vikings, so it's not impossible, but it's not very common. How about that? I like how young that man Harry is. Yeah, N'Keal Harry, he's just not good. That's just kind of the issue with N'Keal Harry. He's not good at football, and you got to be good at football. We do have a super chat we'll throw on screen in just a few moments here from Ronald Putnam. Ronald, we are working on some kind of technical issues on our side of things, but there we go. Big text on the scene. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Ronald. How about taking a chance on N'Keal Harry and keep Tim Patrick with the team in some capacity for his leadership skills? What do you think? So, like I was just saying, for N'Keal Harry, it's not expensive. You could go out and sign him for the vet minimum, and if it doesn't work out, you cut him, and there's no sweat off your back. But as for keeping Tim Patrick with the team, I would definitely love to see Tim Patrick kind of grow into a leadership role, whether that's on the coaching staff side of things. I don't know what Tim Patrick's future is. I know that coming back from an ACL tear and an Achilles injury, well, it's something I've never done. I'm sure it is very difficult to do. And in a lot of cases, it could be career-ending. I mean, that is unfortunately the reality here we have to accept. So if that is the case, maybe Tim Patrick would want to stay on as a coach in a few seasons. Usually don't go straight from playing to coaching. Usually there's some buffer in between. But Ronald, that's definitely an interesting idea. Patrick's an awesome guy. I know everyone loves Tim Patrick, and they rave about his leadership and whatnot. So if Sean Payton would be down for it, I'm sure Tim Patrick would have some interest if that means his playing days are over and he just starts his coaching career earlier. But who knows what Tim Patrick wants to do or what his future holds. Hard to say. But Ronald, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate you. If you want to get on screen like my best friend Ronald Putnam has, you can super chat and we guarantee a spot on screen. Or if you want to go in the live chat and use hashtag Broncos, you can ask a question, and producer Matthew McCullough will just pull his favorite ones and put them on screen for today's mailbag. Now, Big Tex, do we need some more questions? It would help, he says. So if you have not asked a question already and you've got something just burning to ask, whether it's training camp related, Tim Patrick related, anything under the sun, use hashtag Broncos, or like I just mentioned, you can super chat and we'll throw it on screen for everyone to see. I'll give some shout outs while I get some more questions in. Like Nick Jaimez, what happens if we lose Williams again? Thoughts? Use hashtag Broncos and then we can put that on screen. If you don't put hashtag Broncos in there, I know I sound like a broken record, we cannot put it on screen. The software, it just does not roll that way. There it is. Nick heard me loud and clear. So continue to get some questions down there in the comment section, and we will put the best ones up on screen for everyone to see. I'm seeing people go Higgins. Yep, Rashard Higgins, Jarvis Landry. Definitely some notable names there. Sammy Watkins, Hunter Renfrow would be interesting. If you've got any replacement ideas, you can use that in the mailbag by going hashtag Broncos and just kind of tossing your name out there. Moses with a $2 super chat. We'll throw this on screen right now, and then we'll start the mailbag with that text, and we should be ready to roll. So Moses asking right now, what's up? Yeah, we'll throw all three on there. Yeah. Moses, what's going on? With Timmy P out, how do we feel about Greg Dulcich now? Good question. There's more targets to go around. Let's say Tim Patrick was going to get 100 targets. Just give me a nice even number. Well, 100 targets now have to be distributed between Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, whoever's going to replace him, let's say Marvin Mims, and probably Greg Dulcich. So I don't think the guy that takes over Tim Patrick's role is just going to get all 100 targets now. That's not how that works. You have to have the standing within the locker room and on the field to just get all those targets, right? You don't just get to inherit every single one. Whereas Greg Dulcich has some more experience. Wouldn't be shocked if Denver draws up more plays for him. So Moses, very good question. We'll actually start our mailbag off with this question, and I'll kind of, echo what I just said right there. We got some questions coming in. That's awesome to see. We got over 100 people watching. We're at 48 likes. Can we get to 50? It'd be nice to get to 50 to start this mailbag. So if you have not liked today's show, hit that thumbs up button. Once we get to 50, we will jump into our live mailbag. 1 like away. We're at 49 right now. Looking at the live counter. There it is. 50 likes. Love to see it. Love to see it. Big Tex, thumbs up. Okay. Let's get into a live mailbag. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown Mailbag Edition. Hopefully I can get through the whole show with at least remembering my own name, which is Matthew Peterson, and I'm answering all the questions you guys had during our live show, which airs, by the way, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. Our first question we're going to answer, though, comes in from Moses via Super Chat. With Tim Patrick out, how do we feel about Greg Dulcich now? I think Greg Dulcich is definitely in line for a bigger workload. I think Dulcich is a great player. I did pump the brakes a few weeks ago when we talked about Dulcich having a breakout season, saying, hey, I don't think this offense is going to pass the ball enough for every single player to get all the targets they want. And I think Dulcich might be the odd man out, but he probably just picked up some extra targets now that Tim Patrick is out. So this definitely helps his stock, if you will. That sounds bad, but I think Greg Dulcich is probably in line for a bigger season now than he was before. Bonkius Maximus. Broncos fans have PTSD at this point. This is just like a group therapy session at this point where, yeah, this team has just been plagued by injuries, and it sucks. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's strength and conditioning. I mean, we've had a lot of coaches get changed. That's a lot of routines get switched up and everything. But one thing remains constant, and that's injuries. And I wish I had the golden ticket. I don't. I wish I did, though, because if I did, I would be the first man to get on a plane and go to Denver and tell them what to fix and get this over with. Ronald Putnam, next one up. Hi, Matthew. What's going on, Ronald? How about taking a chance on N'Keal Harry and keep Tim Patrick with the team in some capacity for his leadership skills? What do you think? When it comes to N'Keal Harry, I'm not too high on him. Former first-round pick out of Arizona State. He was bad with the Patriots. He was bad with the Bears last year. If you want to take a flyer on him, that's fine. There's no risk whatsoever. You give him a 1-year vet minimum contract with no guaranteed money, and you can cut him, and it's more or less a 2 to 3 week tryout and see if he can live up to those old first-round potential. But I don't think N'Keal Harry's walking through this door and saving this team's wide receiver room. So we can give it a shot. I would not have very high expectations. As for keeping Tim Patrick with the team, would love to see it. I don't know what his playing career has in store beyond this year after the Achilles injury, but if he wants to be a part of the coaching staff down the line, yeah, sign me up. Jerry Judy's burner. Biggest surprise at training camp so far? Good question, Mr. Jerry Judy's burner. Biggest surprise. I'm going to go like a surprise player. I think that's probably what you're asking about. One name that I keep hearing about, and maybe you've heard it already, is the running back out of Youngstown State, the UDFA, Jaleel McLaughlin. So he holds the NCAA rushing title, if you will, over 8,000 yards. So most rushing yards in NCAA history, but he did do it at an FCS school, so it doesn't quite hit the same. But he has been someone who's been a walking highlight so far in training camp. And it's at a good position because if Javonte Williams ends up needing an extra week or two to get ready and he's not quite ready week 1 against the Raiders, having someone to balance the workload with Samaje Perine, who's never really had the lion's share of the workload in a game or a season, McLaughlin would be a great step in. So this is definitely a name to keep in mind in the back of your head as to someone who might turn it on during the preseason and the regular season. Everyone goes, who is that guy? Oh, yeah, the little Darren Sproles fella. Well, he is definitely making this roster. I think he will. Now, off the wall question, because we were just talking about UDFAs making the roster, and I watched Kurt Warner's UDFA story, that movie, American Underdog, on the plane once, and it was solid. It wasn't that great, if I'm being honest, but I do want to know, what's your favorite sports movie all time? For me, it's a no-doubter. It's probably my favorite movie of all time, too. Miracle. It's the best story out there. Favorite movie. Can't go wrong. But let me know. This is the pinned comment, so scroll on down and let me know what your favorite sports movie all time is. Garrett Ringy, what's going on, dude? How likely is it to land Shelby Harris since he visited training camp? He did visit the Broncos last weekend in training camp, and maybe by the time you're watching this, he's already signed with Denver or with somewhere else. But Shelby Harris did also take a visit with the Cleveland Browns not too long after. How likely is it? They just signed Fabian Moreau, so I think if they were going to make a signing, they would have already done it at this point. If the workout went very well, they did not want him to leave and then go to Cleveland and work out there and maybe have the Browns swoop in. So my guess is it didn't go so well that they decided we can't let him leave. We have to sign him right now. How likely then? I'd give it less than 50%. Javonte, what's going on? How do you truly think we need another wide receiver? We have Callaway and Mims. Let's throw on Denver's wide receiver depth chart for a moment, because I agree that when you're talking about replacing Tim Patrick, step one is internal, right? And that's what you find out over the next couple of weeks in training camp and in preseason is, can Marvin Mims and Marquez Callaway, can one of these guys, because they seem like the first two options, handle the workload of a wide receiver 3? And if they discover Marvin Mims is a rookie and he has looked like a rookie so far, and we do not want to trot him out there for wide receiver 3 duties, and if Marquez Callaway isn't impressing for whatever reason, then I think later on in camp you could see them add a wide receiver. But for now, I am sure they're going to spend the next few weeks seeing what they have in-house before they decide to go external. So, Javonte, we're on the same page that step one is see what you have in your own backyard. See what you have in your farm system, right? With Marvin Mims, who you loved so much, you moved up in the draft to get, and the timing really couldn't be better, unfortunately. That sucks to say, but if there was going to be an injury, Marvin Mims being drafted this year would line up nicely to take on a bigger workload. We just have to wait and see if he's ready for a bigger workload, because all we've had so far is a couple of training camp practices. You can't really get to know someone super well until I think some preseason games are played. Nick Jaimez, what's going on? What happens if we lose Williams, Javonte Williams? Should we sign another running back? Yeah. Let's not go down that road, though. Right? Why let's not cross that bridge if we're not even on that island at the moment. Let's stay far away from that island, right? If Denver were to lose number 33, yeah, they have to have, a serious looking into the free agency market for running backs. But we're not at that point. So I don't want to go down that road right now, Nick. But if we do, yeah, they would sign another running back for sure. Now, when it comes to mailbags here, we are the best in the biz because we're all about getting our audience and our subscribers and viewers on screen and having that two-way conversation, which isn't very common for a lot of YouTube channels. So make sure to subscribe if you want to get on screen, if you want your voice heard, and if you want to have a back and forth with myself and not have it be the Matthew Sports Show, but Chat Sports, which is all about chatting. Well, hit that sub button down below. Jackson Nicholson, do you think Zach Allen could break out big this year as he has already looked impressive this training camp? We can throw on Zach Allen's stats over the last 4 seasons. Do I think he's going to have a breakout season? He has looked good so far in training camp. Every year, we do become guilty of getting suckered into training camp storylines. We were all guilty of it last year, and we know how that worked out. So I'm not going to overreact. I make this promise to myself every single August, and I usually break it by the time week 1 rolls around. But this year I really want to stick to it and go, I'm not going to overreact to a couple of training camp practices, which Zach Allen has dominated, but 5.5 sacks last year in 13 games. Denver is hoping to get that 5.5 sack player for 17 games, and that number could balloon up to 9 to 11 sacks, and that would be a very nice addition for this pass rushing unit. How do I think he'll do, though? I don't think he's going to do as well as maybe we're all hoping he will, if I'm being brutally honest. Tyrone Williams, what do you think our record would be this season? I've said for a while now that Denver, in my prediction, goes 9-8. I don't think Sean Payton goes below 500. 9-8 got Miami in the postseason last year, so there might be a playoff team. I don't think it will be this year, though. I know that's the goal. It's always the goal. But I think 9-8 is very much in reach for Denver in 2023. Last question coming in from Kiko Del Rio. Is it Jack Del Rio? Is the line truly improved? I've heard the news from camp, and it sounds like it's not really improved. Jonathan Cooper had a sack today. Well, they missed Mike McGlinchey for the first bit at training camp. He had some personal issues going on, but hopefully all that has been resolved or taken care of, if you will. And I have heard that the defensive line has been winning, which isn't super duper comforting because the defense can't even really go truly 100%. They can't tackle the quarterback or anything. Is the line improved? I think so. It's hard for it not to be improved. Like, we're talking about, we make fun of Graham Glasgow sticking in last year, but he was kind of better than Lloyd Cushenberry was at center. But regardless, hopefully no more Billy Turner, Cam Fleming, and a revolving door at the 2 tackle positions. And we have some stability with Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey. I think it is improved. We'll have to wait and see because I do agree that far too often NFL fans get suckered into training camp storylines and they buy into it way too much, and the regular season comes here and we're like, oh yeah, we kind of knew this was going to happen anyway, but we all just kind of hid behind training camp storylines and hoped it wouldn't. I think it will be better. I don't think it'll be a top 10 offensive line, though. Some summer hot takes now. It is 84 degrees. At least that's what the weatherman said it would be when I filmed this on Tuesday. And that gets us a nice warm plate take. No NFL take today. I am going to go college football just because I can't wait for college football to return. And my warm plate take is that CU covers the roughly 20-point spread against TCU in week 1 of college football down in Fort Worth. Not good year last year for Colorado. We don't need to bring that up. But TCU, which went all the way to the national championship game, lost a lot of players from that team. And that was a Cinderella run, sort of, pretty much. Not sort of, definitely. So I think TCU regresses, and 20 points is a lot of points for Deion Sanders to lose by. I don't think that happens. Give me the Buffs plus 20. Favorite sports movie all time. We will wrap up. Do we get another super? No, we did not. I'm going to give some shout outs here, and then that will do it for us on today's live show. A nice hour-long show. Shout out to everyone who tuned in. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Tuesday to come hang out with us. The news, though, Fabian Moreau signed with the Broncos, the veteran corner, third-round pick by Washington 6 years ago. Last year with the Giants, he comes over to Denver, not to replace anyone, just to add some nice, good quality depth and some leadership and veteran presence in that cornerback room. And the Tim Patrick search is on, baby. We went through in-house options. We went through free agency. We went through trades. A lot of ways Denver can go and replace number 81. I think the first and clear choice is number 83, Marvin Mims. But if that does not get off to a strong start, they might look external into the free agent market. Don't be shocked. Okay. I see Air Bud as a best sports movie. What are we talking? No. Air Bud's a great movie. Good doggy. But not a great sports movie all time. I'm going to go with Miracle on Ice. No doubter about it. That will do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. If you have not subscribed and you liked the show we did today, we put out daily content here on the channel. So latest news and rumors, what's going on at training camp, all that good stuff. So subscribe. That way you don't miss a single thing for your favorite team. Plus, that way you can join us again next week for our next live show, which airs every Tuesday at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. Shout out to you, Matthew McCullough, for getting the wheels off the ground here for today's show. We will sign off. Remember, the Titans is great indeed. Love it. Or The Replacements. I like The Replacements. Good movie. That's going to do it for us, though. We'll see you guys later.